What is a toxic work environment? How do you identify a toxic work environment?
So one of the first indicators that comes to my mind is related to boundaries. So when we hear the word toxic, especially like a toxic friend, usually they are overstepping some kind of boundary and their lack of taking the responsibility for that. And so the same with the work environment. Usually you might find that being more specific to a lack of boundary in your job description and your job role, because it can come off as being a team player. The team leads or the managers or even your team members like asking you to do things that are outside of your job description, outside of your role, or giving you super tight deadlines for something that just seemed very unrealistic, but puts you in a bind of having to really crank this thing out. And the indicator that that's toxic versus team playership, of course, is how often it's happening, the lack of appreciation or the lack of reciprocity in that type of situation. And then, of course, it's constantly just pushing you to a space that's outside of what your role is.
That's great that you said that, because I know I've been in that exact position before where like there's one thing if the job itself already is just kind of demanding, just in and of itself, just the task, is kind of demanding, and you're going to have some natural deadlines. Like say you're working for a magazine publication, like you're going to have deadlines, but what I've experienced is I'm given the task, but there's no support around it. Like if you are going to fail the entire team, the entire process, if you don't do this, it's all on you. Although there's an entire team around you that really should be pitching in, it's really almost kind of putting you in a bind, like waiting for you to fail and like testing you constantly to see if you're really going to meet some test that they've created for you, which really isn't a part of your actual job. And that almost makes it harder for you to do the job, which makes you look more incompetent. And it's almost like, are they doing this on purpose? What is this?
Exactly.
So boundaries is a huge thing. And knowing when to communicate, is that what you mean? Like when you know that your boundaries are being crossed, how do you communicate that in that type of environment?
Well, it's toxic if you feel like you can't. Like if you feel like you're trying to explain that to your leader or your members and their response is like, well, somebody has to do it, or like just get it done, or whatever the case is, or oh well, because it leaves you confused as to like, well, what really is my role, and will I get penalized for not like trying to help? And then of course, well, how do I get the stuff done that I'm actually supposed to do, So to your question, a way to present that is saying just that, helping out for a few things here and there. And then once you realize it's become a pattern, some things that I've always done is kind of just try to go back to whatever the role is defined as, or whatever the handbook says, or whatever the case is. So a prime example is like at the school setting. I can speak from my personal experience. Within a school, there's tons of folks around, tons of things going on. And sometimes school counselors are asked to do things that are outside of our role because we don't have a classroom of teachers. So in those cases, for my department, I've had to go back to, we have ASCA, America's School Counseling Association. And I go back to those standards when I reach out to the principals and say, according to the ASCA standards, these these jobs or these activities are not part of our standards and get in the way of us being able to serve students in X, Y, and Z way. So in the fashion industry, for example, whatever your job title was, or whatever you agreed to, or however the situation is designed, going back to that lead person and describing like, this is what I've been asked, and this doesn't exactly align with what I was hired to do, or with the production, or and maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on the right type of verbiage in that situation, but just going back to whatever the standard has been explained to you. And if it hasn't, for example, which happens very often sometimes in these roles, especially because there's so many different people on a set, right? And you're told that, oh, I'm a X, Y, and Z thing. You're kind of great. So asking for that, saying, is there a list of duties that I'm responsible for? I'd love to be able to best help. Like, what are those responsibilities that I'm over?
I really like that you said that, because the thing when, there's one thing if you're working for, say, a large corporate company that is in the fashion industry, whether that's a large publication like a Condé Nast or a Hearst, or maybe like corporate retail or something like that. But especially if you're a freelancer, if you're working on several different sets with several different people at any given time, there is no handbook anywhere. There's nothing for you to rely on. So a lot of stuff can go down and you be kind of unprotected. So, I mean, sometimes you have, you can be a part of the union, but usually that's for television production. That's usually not for, if you're like a a stylist or if you're a hair makeup artist working off of a television production, if you're doing like an editorial magazine thing, there's not any of that. But going to whoever is making that environment toxic for you, which will probably be a leader of some sort, maybe the production company who hired you, and having them reiterate exactly what your tasks are supposed to be, even confirming that before you hop on set, just confirm that with them when you confirm the booking, when you confirm the job, confirm that with whomever is you're assisting or, whoever has hired you.